When we ask ourselves what the greatest threat to American liberty is, our minds often conjure dramatic images of foreign armies on our shores or a catastrophic economic collapse. But perhaps the most profound and insidious threat is far more subtle. It is not an external force, but a quiet choice, made not with malice, but with deep conviction, in the minds of millions of good, intelligent people. This leads us to a disturbing question. What if the most dangerous form of ignorance isn't a simple lack of knowledge, but a willing surrender of our own intellect? What if it's a force that can weaponize intelligence itself, turning brilliant minds into instruments of harm? Consider the physician, a trusted pillar of their community, who confidently shares medical misinformation online, convinced they are revealing a hidden truth. Or picture the loving parent, a patriot deeply concerned for their country's future, who becomes consumed by a baseless election conspiracy theory found in the depths of a social media echo chamber. These are not villains. They are not unintelligent. They are capable, well-meaning Americans who have, often unconsciously, stopped doing the hard, essential work of thinking for themselves. This phenomenon, this intellectual surrender, is not new. Decades ago, a theologian named Dietrich Bonhoeffer diagnosed this very social disease while locked in a Nazi prison cell. He gave it a name, and his warning from the past has never echoed more urgently in America's present. The man who gave us this chilling diagnosis was Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a brilliant theologian and pastor in Germany. He was not a detached academic. He was a man of deep faith and conviction who watched in horror as his beloved country descended into the moral abyss of Nazism. For his active resistance to the regime, he was imprisoned. And it was there, in the stark reality of a prison cell awaiting his own execution, that Bonhoeffer articulated a terrifying conclusion. The greatest danger to civilization was not the overt evil of the fanatical few, but something far more pervasive. It was a specific kind of stupidity. Against stupidity we are defenseless, he wrote from his cell. Neither protests nor the use of force accomplish anything here. Reasons fall on deaf ears. But Bonhoeffer's stupidity had nothing to do with a person's IQ or level of education. He was describing a moral and intellectual failure, not a cognitive deficiency. It was an active surrender of one's critical faculties to the overwhelming power of a social movement, a political party, or a charismatic leader. He saw it happening all around him. Highly educated doctors, brilliant academics, and respected professionals who knew better, yet who publicly endorsed policies that violated every principle they once claimed to hold dear. They weren't unintelligent. They had simply chosen to stop thinking for themselves, trading their personal integrity for the comfort of belonging. They had handed over their intelligence to the group. Bonhoeffer's observation from his prison cell was not just philosophical, it was profoundly psychological. He was describing a flaw, a vulnerability hardwired into the human psyche that decades of scientific research have since laid bare. The question he raised, why do smart people willingly surrender their intelligence to a group, was answered not in the halls of theology, but in the university laboratories of post-war America. Consider the groundbreaking conformity experiments of Solomon Asch in the 1950s. Participants were asked to complete a simple visual task. Match the length of a line to one of three choices. But they were placed in a room with actors all instructed to give the same, obviously wrong answer. The silent pressure to conform was so powerful that a staggering 75% of participants went against the clear evidence of their own eyes and agreed with the group's incorrect choice at least once. If the gentle pressure of our peers is that potent, the command of a perceived authority figure is even more unsettling. At Yale University in the early 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram told ordinary citizens to deliver what they believed were increasingly painful and even fatal electric shocks to a person in another room. A horrifying 65% of them obeyed the man in the lab coat all the way to the end, despite hearing what sounded like screams of agony. These are not just dusty academic studies. They are the living blueprints for our digital age. The pressure of Asch's small room is now the immense, global pressure of our social media feeds, where a viral narrative can feel like an undeniable consensus. And Milgram's single man in a lab coat has become the modern cacophony of influencers, pundits, and anonymous experts demanding our trust. This is the psychological engine that allows demonstrably false claims about our health or our elections to take root, not through a lack of intelligence, but through our deep, human desire to fit in and our dangerous deference to authority. And in 21st century America, the engine of conformity and obedience is running at full throttle, supercharged by technology. The scale of this intellectual surrender is now measurable, and the numbers are sobering. A 2023 survey by the Kaiser Family Foundation revealed that at least 4 in 10 Americans have been exposed to demonstrably false claims about critical issues like COVID-19, reproductive health, or gun violence, with many admitting they simply weren't sure what to believe. The primary accelerant for this confusion is the very ecosystem where we now conduct our civic life: social media. A landmark 2018 study from MIT found that on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, falsehoods spread a staggering 6 times faster than the truth. The reason is both simple and sinister. Lies, outrage, and conspiracies are more emotionally stimulating. They hijack our primal instincts of fear and tribalism, bypassing the slower, more deliberate process of critical thought. The result was on full display during the COVID-19 pandemic, where we witnessed the surreal spectacle of medical doctors and highly trained engineers becoming evangelists for bizarre vaccine conspiracies. They didn't do this because they had forgotten their scientific training. They did it because they were trapped in powerful digital echo chambers, where the social pressure to conform and the validation from a like-minded online group overwhelmed years of professional knowledge. They proved Bonhoeffer's theory in real time. But the power of these digital echo chambers is magnified by another, more tangible force: the relentless economic and social pressures of modern American life. Bonhoeffer's theory emerged from a society in crisis, and our own subtle crises provide the fertile ground for intellectual surrender to grow. For millions, the American dream has become a frantic race on a treadmill, juggling multiple jobs to make ends meet, crushed under the weight of student loan debt, or one medical emergency away from financial ruin. In this state of chronic stress and exhaustion, the mental energy required for careful, critical thought is not a given. It is a scarce and precious resource. This gives rise to a phenomenon economists call rational ignorance. When you are bombarded with thousands of posts, headlines, and angry opinions every day, the decision to not spend 20 minutes fact-checking a provocative claim isn't laziness. It becomes a necessary survival strategy. In a culture that relentlessly preaches that time is money, the act of outsourcing your thinking to a trusted group or influencer can feel like the most efficient, most rational choice of all. We accept the simple, emotionally satisfying answer over the complex, nuanced truth because we simply lack the bandwidth to do otherwise. But while this choice may be understandable for an individual, its collective consequence is devastating, creating a society that is dangerously susceptible to manipulation and primed for division. Faced with this cascade of historical warnings, psychological vulnerabilities, and modern pressures, it is easy to feel hopeless. But hopelessness is a luxury we cannot afford, because intellectual surrender is ultimately a choice. And if it is a choice, it means we can consciously choose to fight back and reclaim our own minds. The good news is that this is not a silent battle. Across the country, a movement is growing. Organizations like the News Literacy Project and Media Literacy Now are on the front lines, equipping students and adults with the tools to distinguish credible information from a flood of falsehoods. But the most powerful defense doesn't start in a classroom. It starts in the quiet of our own conscience. It is a form of personal rebellion against the noise. It's the discipline to spend 30 minutes a week intentionally reading an argument from a source you disagree with, not to change your mind, but to test if the foundations of your own beliefs are sound. It's the simple, revolutionary act of pausing for 60 seconds before sharing an outrageous post, taking one deep breath, and checking an independent source. And perhaps most importantly, it's the profound courage and humility to say 3 of the most powerful words in a polarized world: I don't know. Each of these small acts is a vote for a healthier democracy, a daily exercise that strengthens our collective immune system against the virus of misinformation. This is not a new or radical idea, it is a foundational American one. As Thomas Jefferson reminded us, A well-informed citizenry is the only true guardian of a republic. Whenever the people are well-informed, he said, they can be trusted with their own government. The journey from Dietrich Bonhoeffer's prison cell to our own chaotic digital landscape reveals a timeless and uncomfortable truth. The greatest threat to a free society is not a lack of intelligence in its people, but a surrender of that intelligence to the seductive comfort of the crowd and the exhausting pressures of modern life. The enemy Bonhoeffer identified has not disappeared. It has simply changed its uniform, trading jackboots and armbands for viral hashtags and algorithm-driven feeds. The methods are new, but the danger to democracy remains the same. In a world drowning in information but starved for wisdom, the choice to think for oneself is no longer a mere intellectual exercise. It is a profound act of courage. It is the essential work of citizenship. The American experiment was founded on the radical belief that ordinary people, armed with reason and virtue, could govern themselves. The question now, for each of us, is whether we are still willing to do that work. In this great contest of ideas, will we be active participants or passive spectators? Will we think, or will we simply believe? The future of the Republic rests on our answer.